Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the second video in my series of building the app I'm calling Credos. If you haven't seen the intro video and you're curious what this app is or why I'm making it, you can see that below. This is our second working session. The first one we got some basic CRUD worked out for how we're going to store some of this data, and we also added a user model and some login, sign out kind of stuff. So in this video, we're going to continue on right from there. So let's get to it. So what I'll probably do in this video, we have this user that we can log in, if I can spell their email correctly. And we have this page that allows us to make a record for today. So if I create this, here's my record. If I go back to /today, I'm editing this existing record. And so what I think I'm going to do today, for one, we are not associating this record to the user. So for example, if I open a private browsing window and I go to same thing, localhost 3000 /today, I'm still able to edit this exact same record. Here we have record 4. Try and make this a little bigger. And so this record is not tied to my logged in user because I can still access it even though I'm not logged in. So the first thing I think I want to do is go ahead and tie that to our user record. Okay, and so to do that, let's go to our records controller, to our create action. And so in this action, we already are using this merged params. And this merged params is basically the data from the form, and then we're merging in the current day. And so what I want to do here is I want to also merge in the current user. So what I'd like to do is like user, current user. So this is what I want. To do this, we need two things. One, we need a relationship on the record model that points to a user. And then we also need to come up here to the controller, and we need to make sure that we are authenticated. So we need to do like a before action authorize user kind of thing. So we need to make sure that we are logged in before we can see this controller. So first thing I want to do is get this new association on the record built. And to do that, I'm going to generate a new migration. So Rails-G migration. Go ahead and make this full screen for now. Rails-G migration, add user to records. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up that migration, add user to records. We're going to add a column to our records table. We're going to call it user ID. Okay, so actually I'm remembering there's a way to do this that will also generate the foreign key and the constraints. So of all the associations that Rails has, it has quite a few. This record is going to belong to a user. So a user would have many records, and a record belongs to a user. I think it's dot references. Yeah. I think that's what it is. Okay, so let's try that. Let's say, okay, well actually, so this format is only used in the create table. So we might have to do this manually, but that's okay too. Okay, so we have this user ID we want to set up. So let's do a big int. And then let's also add an index so that the lookup of this is fast. So we're going to add an index to records. on user ID. And then I also want a foreign key because I want to make sure that a foreign key says that any value put in this column has to exist in the other table. So here we have a user ID that we're storing on records. It doesn't make sense to store a user ID that there isn't a user with that ID. So foreign key makes that constraint where it will not allow the database to insert or update the record unless that exists. So where's the section on foreign keys? So there's this add reference. Okay. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. So when you're creating a table, you can do this because you have this block where you're making the table. Let's make this bigger. I don't know if you can see that. So when you're creating a table, you have this block that you pass. And so you can do t.references and then pass whatever the association is. If you are not inside of this table block, you've already made the table, you're just doing a migration, you give this add reference. Okay, so let's use that because that will be cleaner. So let's do add reference, records, user. Does that also make the column? I guess we can see. Okay, so let's do Rails DB migrate. And let's see what happened. Okay, so added a new column, user ID, and we add a new index on the records table. Show a little more context here. Okay, great. So now we have this column added to our database. So let's go back to our models. Let's open the record model over here, user model over here, and let's add the association. So a record belongs to a user, and a user has many records. We're gonna make those dependent destroy. So when a user is deleted, we're gonna clean up all of the record data they have. Okay, so with that, let's come back to our Rails console. Let's do a reload. And let's try and do the association. So let's get our first user. So user equals user.first. Let's get our record. So we'll do record equals record.first. And then let's take, so here we see that this record has a user ID of nil. So let's say record.user equals our user, and then record.save. So now if we reload our record, we'll see that we have a user ID of 1. So we should be able to do record.user, points to our first user, and then we can kind of go backwards where we can say user.records, and here's our collection of records. Okay, so all of that appears to be working. Okay, so we've got our associations good to go. So now we want to do kind of like we talked about earlier in our records controller. When we create this record, we want to also assign the current user. So let's come down here to our merged params. Go ahead and break that out. Assign the user is our current user. Okay, so now let's go back to the browser and let's look in the sorcery gem for what it calls the require login. Okay, which is called require login. So come here to our controller and we'll say before action. So run this thing, run this function, run this code before any of these actions happen. And so we're going to do require login. So now if we try and access any of these records, I'll open a private browsing to clear my session. So I can say logged in on this side, and then in this. Let's go ahead and close that. Can stay logged in this browser, and then anything I do in this private window won't use my session, so I'm not logged in. Okay, and so we get this error, undefined local variable or method. So, hey, I don't know what this thing is. You said root path, but I don't know what that is. And this appears to be happening inside of the sorcery gem. And so what's happening here is when you're not logged in and you try to access a logged in page, sorcery tries to redirect you to a place that you can go. So it tries by default the root path. So I tried to access something that I couldn't, which is this record, which belongs to this logged in user. And so it's going to try and send me to the root path, but I don't have a root path defined. So let's go to routes, and we can send the root to something here. So we don't have this page generated. We have this, well, of course, that's not valid, so let's take that back out. We have this generated page that Rails makes, but this is actually just a static HTML file. Where is that located? I think it's in public. What's it called? Index? Forget where this file is. I haven't installed ACK yet. Sorry, this is a new computer. I don't have my search already set up. Okay, well, so this file is somewhere in this project, and it's just a static file. Is it in temp? Oh no, open no modules. I didn't mean it. Okay, well, anyways. So, regardless, basically, we need a place to send them to, so let's go ahead and generate a new controller. I'm going to call it page, and I'm going to make an index action and view for it. So let's come back over here, and let's go ahead and send the root to page index. Okay, so now if I reload this, now going to page index. So now if I come back here and I reload, so I hit this page that I'm not allowed to see, and it just takes me back to the index. Okay. So now this record is tied to our current user. So I'm going to go ahead and destroy all of our existing records. Well, instead of that, let's see how many we have. So we have 2. So if we do record.pluck user ID, one of these is going to come back as nil because we don't have a user on it. So let's try record.last. Just going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do record.last, update attribute, user ID. We're just going to do user.first.id. Just to kind of clean up some of the old data. Okay, so now we have 2 records. Let's go ahead and see when those are for. So record.pluck. Let's pluck the day. Okay, so we've got one from today, which is the 8th, and one from yesterday, which is the 7th. Okay, so now this is tied to a record. It's tied to a user, and these views are now behind authentication. So you can't access them unless you're logged in. Okay, what do we want to do now? So let's go ahead and commit this. So let's review our changes real quick. We added a before action that requires login. We merged in the current user. We added an association, so a record belongs to a user. A user has many records. Added a root page. Added this new column to the database with an index, and then we got some auto-generated stuff. So let's commit this. add user association, 2 records, and a root homepage. Okay, so now what I want to do, I think, right now we have this update record button. And if we go to, let's look at my mockups that I made. So what I would really like to happen here is when you click this checkbox, it just automatically changes the data and saves it. So that way you don't have to do this, click all these and then hit update or hit create. So what I'd really like to have happen is it just automatically does it when you click it. And so to do that, there's a couple different approaches. We could use the, within Rails, you can render JavaScript. And so we could set these checkboxes when they change to post the form asynchronously, and then use Rails JavaScript to communicate back. We could also break it into a React component and set up an API that would receive the data. So let's go ahead and try that. So let's start. It's a little interesting in the create case because let's go ahead and destroy all of our records. Because when we do this, when we do /today, and we're making a new record, we need to either the first time we click this, make a new record, or this record kind of already needs to exist. Because when we fire this, let's say this is asynchronous, and we click this and then it sends the request, we need that record to either be created on the fly or we need it to already exist at that point. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm thinking about just making it, when you hit this new page, basically create a record for today automatically and then redirect you to the update page, because then we can just fire the events. So I'm going to try that. I'm not sure if this is the best way to go about it, but I think it will at least work. Okay, so let's open our today controller. So in this controller, we are looking for a record for today. If one exists, then we go to edit it. If not, we're just going to the new path. So what we could do here is make a new record and then go to update. So here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new record. New record.create. And we're going to do, again, very naive implementation, date.today, and we're going to pass our current user. And then we're going to take this record and we're just going to similarly go to this edit path. Okay, so there's one thing we need here, and we need to make sure that we are logged in. So before action, require login. And then since these two lines are the same, so if the record exists, we go to the edit page. Once we create it, we go to the edit page. We can kind of extract this a little bit. So one thing I just saw we also need to do when we're querying for the record, we also need to make sure that it belongs to the current user. That looks kind of gross. I don't know if I like it formatted like that. just keep it like that. Okay, so if the record exists, cool. Otherwise, so really what we want to do here is we want to say if the record is nil, if the record does not exist, then we want to create that record. Let's assign it the same name. And then our default case, at the end of it, we have a record. Regardless, we either made it or we found it. Okay, so first we look for it. If it exists, then we skip this if block and we just go directly to the edit page, and then otherwise we create it. So now if I go to /today, it should, let's make sure we delete all our records. Okay, we don't have any. So it should create a new record and then send me to the edit page, which it does. And so now if I edit, let's mark a couple of things here, and then hit /today again, then it takes us back to this existing record. Okay, so now we know we are always going to have a record in existence for today when we visit this page. So basically now we're only really dealing with the edit and update actions. So inside of our records controller, we are no longer using the new or the create actions. Okay, so now that we've got this in place, one little quick note about what we're doing here. In a real production app, you would not want to just put all of your query and creation logic in the controller, as that starts to get complex, or you start to have to do a lot of things to set up your state of the world, who you are, what access you have, all that kind of stuff. It gets kind of messy, and we can also notice that we have kind of duplicated some of this stuff. So in our records controller, in our merge params, we're specifying that the date is today and the current user is the user. We're duplicating this here when we do this create. So it would be very easy to make a mistake in one of these two places and not realize that we've either left a place out or we've messed one of them up. And so generally you would wrap up this kind of logic into another class or some type of abstraction, so that you have one place that you can call it and then you can change it in one place. And we will probably do that a little bit later, but I'll just leave this for now, since we're not even using the create anymore with this new setup. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and commit this. So let's review what we did here. Required authentication, required them to be logged in for the /today route. We're either going to find or create a record for them, and then we're just going to go ahead and redirect to the edit path. So let's say require login on /today and find or create the record and redirect to the update. There is a find or create method we could have used here, actually, but I'm okay with this. It's a little more verbose, but it's also very clear what's happening. Okay, so let's go ahead and push that up. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to make this view more interactive. So in the mockup, I envisioned just being able to click these checkboxes and that would persist the data. And so when this, turns green when you click it, it would show you, hey, you did something here, and it would just automatically do it in the background. And so there's a couple ways we could go about this. We could use some like vanilla JS stuff. We could use some Rails JS. We could do a little React component and expose an API to send the data to. And I think that's the way I'm going to go. I'm going to try and make a little React component out of this, because one, I think it would be educational to see that process. And also, I think it's just also, it's very clean and kind of straightforward. At least it should be. Okay, so let's close some of these things. And let's do, so Rails 5, I believe, introduced Webpacker. It's like a wrapper around Webpack. And so it's now fairly easy to get React going in here. Okay, so I already have Webpacker because that comes by default. So let's go ahead and add React Rails. I like to go to Ruby Gems and grab the specific version number. That's interesting. So 2.6 is available, but they're having me use 1.7. I like to grab it from here and kind of lock these down. Lock down the version so that way when you bundle it doesn't change everything. It's from 2016. Why is this so out of date? Okay, well we can grab 2.60. Oops. Okay, so let's do that and let's bundle install. I have that alias to B, just the letter B because you're going to be typing that a lot. So that's a good alias to have. Okay, I believe we've already installed Webpacker. So now let's run Rails Webpacker install React. Go ahead and close the console for now. Okay. And then let's do Rails generate React install. So this will give us a components directory. I guess I could bump this up. React Rails UJS. I was just reading about this UJS, React Rails UJS. Okay, so now let's make just a sample component and just make sure our configuration's working. I really like to make very simple, dumb things to make sure that the routing is set up, the configuration set up before I start writing my own code, because it's really frustrating to get into, plugging away at your own code and figure out something is messed up, and then you have to try and back all that out. You don't know if it's yours. You don't know if it's a setup thing. So it's nice to just see very simple things working before you move on. Okay, so here we have this Hello React component. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's go ahead and just try and put this in, let's just put it in the application layout. Let's just see if it renders correctly. So we're going to grab this, let's put it above our content. Let's go ahead and restart the server just in case. I don't think there was anything that needs to be reinitialized, but it doesn't hurt. Okay, so we refresh here. Now it's compiling everything. Cool. Okay, so this component appears to work. Okay, so I think we're pretty good on that. So let's make our own component now. Oops. Okay, let's call it auto submit checkbox. What properties do we need to send it? We'll need to send it the record ID, which will make an integer, and we'll need to send the field name. I don't know, let's start with record ID, and we can work from there. So my idea here is I'm going to take this view, and I'm going to render basically all 7 of these checkboxes as this React component. And when you change the state of the checkbox, the component is going to make an API request to, let's say like /API/records, and it's going to post our data for us. And that will happen obviously in JavaScript asynchronously. And so we don't need the submit button, and we don't have to reload the page to submit. Okay, so let's go ahead and put one of these on the page. So let's take away our test component from the layout. Let's go to records form. Actually, let's grab that. Whoa, too late, I already undid it. I'm gonna grab that text to put it on. Okay, so here we are in the form. Let's just plop it right there. So our component is called auto submit checkbox. I'm going to pass the record ID, which is record.id. So now we should see this show our record ID of 5 right here on the page. Okay, cool. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make an API that just accepts takes a record ID, and then it takes a parameter, or it sends a parameter that is the field name, and then whether that is true or false. And what we're going to do to make this easy on the authentication side, if we just opened up this API and let anything hit it, then anybody could change anyone else's data. So we'll want it to only work on the current record, or the current record of today for one, but also the user's current record. And so I believe there's a way to do that by passing our session token. We can pass our token, I think it's called same origin. Same origin cookie. Yeah, there's a way to say like, hey, this is like, I'm still the same web page that you have already authenticated, and this is me. So there's a way when using fetch. It's like fetch same origin. There's a way to specify the Okay, so let's try this. Oh, so I did integer, but maybe it's number. I think it's number instead of integer for the record ID type. Okay, so what we want to do, let's go ahead and just make a button real quick. And on click, we want to do this dot. It's called submit. Let's make a function called submit. It's been a while since I did React stuff, so hopefully this goes well. Okay. So I got this button here that has no text. So what I want to do first is taking baby steps. I want to make sure this button is wired up. Invalid event handler property on click. Did you mean on capital C click? I did. Thank you. So I want to first, is the submit action wired up correctly? Okay. So I think I need to prevent the default submit action, which I will not need, I think, in the end, because I'll be using a checkbox, but okay. So let's edit, and then press this, console logs, cool. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to make a new API endpoint. So let's add a namespace. Let's call it, it's called API. And let's do resource for records. Let's do update only. And then let's make a new controller for that. So let's make a new directory called API. And then inside of that, we can do records controller.rb. Do class API, records controller. We're going to inherit this from application. So we want to do action controller API, I think it's called. So this is the base. Yeah, so if you want all the view stuff, you inherit from application controller. If you want a basic, if you're using an API, then you can use this application controller API. And then let's do an update action. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to throw the params for this endpoint. So now let's just see if we can get our little button to ping the endpoint. So let's use fetch. And this may not be available in every browser. Okay, it's not. So what is, we can either do polyfills or we can do, let's see if there's a cross-browser version of this. Come on, IE, killing me. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and use this now, and then we will do the cross-browser stuff later. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to say fetch. Let's pass our local host 3000/API/records. And we want to set the method. So our method is put, and let's send a header of content type, application JSON, and then our body, let's just send some random stuff. Okay, so let's try this. So let's pull up our network tab. Click, got a 400. Bad request. Params are object. So I think it's because we did not do, might need a toJSON on this. Okay, I'm clicking and nothing's happening. So let's reload. Clicking and nothing is happening. Is it toJSON? Is that how it works? Oh, JSON.stringify. What is this well-formed JSON string? Oh, okay. So looks like we have browser support. So let's do JSON.stringify. Okay, we're getting a 404, which makes sense because we're sending it to API/records, and in our routes, we only have an update action. So what we need to do is include the record ID that we have. So let's just bust this out to its own thing. So we have URL. We use the backticks so I can string interpolate. And let's do this.props.recordID. And then we'll use URL here. Okay, let's refresh. And we're clicking and nothing is happening again. So why is nothing happening? Ah, this is undefined. And I believe that is because we did not bind it here. Okay, so it's submitted. And we get a 500, which makes sense because we threw the params. So we have blah true coming through. Okay, it's expecting us to wrap this in a record object, so we can do that. Let's go ahead and do this, where we can do const data. Using const here, if you don't know the difference between const or let, Const is if you're not going to change it, you're not going to modify it afterwards. So let's do JSON stringify. Well, we'll keep that normal. So we'll do record. Bring this back in here. And then for our body, we'll do JSON stringify of data. Okay, let's refresh and confirm that we did that correctly. Cool. Okay, so we have our record. We have the data that we're sending, and we're getting our ID through. Okay, so now what we want to do is in our form, I want to send the name of the attribute. So we're sending our record ID. Let's also send the name of an attribute. So let's just call it physical. And let's send, or no, let's say, let's call it the attribute name. And that's going to be physical. So now in our checkbox component, we're accepting something, attribute name. I hope that's not a keyword. I don't think it'll bite us, but that's something to keep in mind. That sounds like something that might be used in React itself. Okay, so we have this attribute name props. And then we're going to use it down here. So we're going to pass how do we use a variable right here? So I guess we can make a new object. So let's call this record. I'm forgetting the syntax. Like in Ruby, I would do like variable name this. So JavaScript object with variable key. So here they just want you to make a new. Oh, okay, so it says in ES6, you can do that. So that's good. We can do that. Okay. So we can do this dot props dot attribute name, and then let's give it the value true. Okay, let's try that. Okay, cool. So we see our attribute name is coming through. Okay, so now we're hitting the API endpoints. Don't have any authentication. One thing I'm gonna do real quick, because all the React people are screaming at me, I can hear them. So we're binding this function in the render method, which means that every time we hit render, which happens a lot, it will do this bind. And so what you can do is you can basically do it once in the constructor, do the binding, and then just reference that outside of it. Do I need a super here? I'm not sure if I do. Let's try it without, and then we'll put it back. Okay, did not load, which means it's probably a console error. This is undefined. That's happening on line 6, which is the submit, and I'm guessing that's because we are not doing super. So we're not initializing correctly. Okay. Cool. All right, so now we're in a pretty good place. So what we want to do now, let's go to API Records Controller. And what we want to do here, similar to our other controllers, is we actually want to do this update. So we'll say record params. So we'll do params.requireRecord. And then we're going to permit these same attributes that we have in our records controller. And for now, we're actually still accepting day here in our records controller through the UI, and we don't want to do that. So again, I'm copy pasting. Should probably move this into the model and then do something like record create params and reference these. Well, we can just go ahead and do that now. Nah, let's keep it. We'll do cleanup stuff later. Wild and loose. Okay, so here we have our params. We're going to do a similar thing. We're going to get the record. So record.find params of ID. And I'm going to do a to-do here. We need to look this up by the user for authorization. So anyone can hit our API. They can pass any ID they want. So we want to make sure that you're actually accessing a record that is yours. But we'll come back to that. Okay, so here's our record. So do record.update. And so we'll do to do here of it failed, do something. Otherwise, we're going to render JSON. Is it okay? What is the response for? So what we can do, let's go ahead and just return the record back. We can probably use that in the client side to change our properties. So we're going to render the record and we're going to send a status of OK. So now I believe that this update should work. So I'm gonna update this the normal way. So this physical attribute is not set. So when I hit this button, because we pass physical and we're passing true hard-coded right here, this should update it. But it threw a 500 for a syntax error. Oh, missed something. So we do render JSON. Okay, try again. Click. Okay, it appears to work. Seems that this attribute has been set. It's rendered true. And it works. Cool. Okay, so now since we're sending this record back, let's get this record and let's change this property. Well, let's not do that quite yet. First thing is I want to make sure that I am logged in because I want to look up this record by the user. And so this is going back to our same origin thing. So So I'm going to do before action, require login, similar to our other controllers. And so now when I click this, I get a 500. And I believe that's because sorcery is not included because I'm inheriting from application controller API. So what I think I need to do is I need to include sorcery. But I'm not sure how to do that. So let's do sorcery gem API. Okay, this looks promising. Okay, in order to use sorcery with the action controller API, you need to manually include sorcery controller. Okay, that seems like what I want. If we added more API controllers later, I would move this into its own base API controller class, but it is fine for now. Okay, so now let's try. We should get a 400, I think. So how does it know it's me? So I'm sending the cookie. So it's already sending the session, so I haven't told it to do anything. Oh, is that what this Rails helper tag does? Does it also send the session with it? Or is it somehow leveraging an existing token? It's interesting. So that means I already have current user here. Oops, that's the wrong button. So I click this, it should error and throw current user. Yeah, definitely knows it's me. So if I go to the records controller that's loading this page, uncomment, requiring login, and open a private browser. And now click this. Get a 404. But why do I get a 404? Oh, no, here it is. So API records 5. So I have a session. But it didn't throw anything. Oh, I have required login still in this controller. So the API is still trying to log me in, but I'm obviously not logged in this session. So it must be sending me to the home page and then giving me like my own new session. Okay. Interesting. So let's put require login back. So we do have our current user here. So what we can do here is we can say current user dot records dot find. And so by going from current user dot records, instead of doing record dot find, we're no longer just looking up anything by ID. So this one, you can pass any ID and we'll look it up. This one, the current user has to have that record as a part of its association. And so the way to test that is what I can do is I can log in. So I'm test at test.com over here. In this new session, I'm going to be blah.com. And let's go ahead and undo this real quick. So now if I take tests record, I do it in blah's session. I still need to fix the update. But now, let's put these side by side. So I've got blah's session over here, got test over here. If I press this and reload, I've updated record 5, which I should not be able to do. So by doing this, now if I try a similar thing, should have kept that open. Now we go to the 5th record, which we will also want to guard this page too. You shouldn't be able to just visit this record as the wrong person, but just testing the API itself right now. If I hit, let's go ahead and open the console. If I hit press me here, I get a 404. Because I'm not able to find this record. Okay. So let's go and make it to do in our record controller. So let's do need authorization here, just so we don't forget. Okay. So now we have this working through the API. So we have this little button. So now let's go to our form and let's build all these out. Okay, so we've got all these attributes. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of our old form fields. Let's get rid of our submit. So now we have all these beautiful buttons. Okay, so what we want to do is let's go into our render and let's just put something on the page. Let's do this.props.attribute name. Let's go ahead and get rid of this record text. Okay, I saved. Why are you not getting rid of the record? Excuse me, sir. Please. Why does it still say record 5? Is it still in my form? Somehow the React stuff is not recompiling. Have console errors? What's going on? Okay, I saved something new. You should recompile. Do a hard refresh. Okay, that's weird. Okay, so now we have all these things. And what we're going to do is we're going to take in their initial value based on the model. So I'm going to take the attribute name, and we're going to pass in attribute value, which is going to be record dot whatever this is. And then we've got a new value here, so we've got attribute value. This is going to be a Boolean. And so let's also just put this on the page just to make sure we have all the data flowing correctly. Gonna make it very ugly, and then we'll put the styles on it, and it'll be magic. Okay. So we didn't get anything there. Okay, so we are not getting anything here. Why is that? Let's just put the record, let's put this value on the page in the Rails template and just see what it is. So it is false. Did I not spell something right? Attribute name, attribute value. Okay, so this should It's confusing because I'm getting the attribute name. Like this is being set. So why would this value not be here? Did I spell this right? Is this a refresh thing again? That's very weird. Very weird. Prop type attribute value is invalid. It must be a function. Received undefined. So it's saying that it did not get anything for this. Failed prop type. Attribute value is invalid. It must be a function, usually from the prop types. Is this just a bool? Well, I didn't get an error. Okay, let's just Google real quick. Prop types. Yeah, it's bool. Okay, no console errors. Does this need to be a string? Like, do I have to pass a string into it? Expected type string. I guess it's okay for this to be a string because when we submit it to the API, it should handle either, but that should work as a Boolean. It's very weird. So let's look at this record. Yeah, that should work. Spelled everything right. That is very weird. No console errors. Okay. Well, we can do a string. That's fine. Chalk that up to things we'll figure out later. Okay, so we're getting our data passed in. Now what we want to do is this button or this styling obviously needs to change as we toggle it on and off. And so what we need to do is we have this property for the value, attribute value, but we need that to be dynamic. So we're going to be changing it, toggling it back and forth. So we need to actually store this stuff as state. And state is in React is something that you can is meant for changing, and props are meant as something you pass in that stays the same. So we want to do, let's just call it value. So here's our state. So now let's put that state here. This state.value. So now nothing should have changed. We're just passing it in, except something is broken. Attribute value is not defined. Is it this.props or is it just props? Yeah, so what I need to do here, I think, is accept the props, accept them here, and then just reference them off of that. Okay, so we're back here. We're now using this state value. And so what I want to do is after, the reason I sent back the object from our API, if we look at that again, here we're sending back the entire object, and I want to pull that value off of here. So let's do a dot then, response, and then let's just console log the response. Okay, so status to 200, that's what we want. So what we'll do is we'll say if the response is 200, then we'll do something. Otherwise, we're going to do we're going to handle errors there. And then what we're going to do is let's try and grab, we want to get the new value off of the body. So let's try and print it out first. Let's print out the response dot body. I wonder if we can do dot body dot record, or if we need to parse this. Okay, so let's click this. And nothing is happening. That's good. The request is working. So let's do console log right there just to see if we're getting that far. So we're not. So I don't know that we're getting in. Just seeing which line we're getting to. Okay, so we are going to need the response. But the response is not 200. Is 200 a string in this scenario? Because I'm doing 3 equals, so I'm doing, type equal as well. Let's print out the response. Doesn't appear to be. Oh, duh. I'm doing response equals. I need to do response.status. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so the body is a stream that we need to read. I think we need to do .json on it. Yeah. So let's make a record. Let's call. Does this JSON also return a promise? I have a feeling it might. Yeah. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take this response, make it JSON, and then do the stuff that we want. And then let's just remember to throw a catch in here. Okay, so let's just see what the result is there. Okay, so we have this object. Looks like we can call record on it. So let's do result.record. Okay, one more step. Might be overkill, but let's just do one thing at a time. Okay, so we did get true. So what we want to do is we want to say this dot set state, and we want to pass in this dot props dot attribute name, and the value is going to be result.record, and then I need to get same thing. So let's pull this out. So name is going to be this, and then we're going to pull out the name from the result. So let's see how that works. It does not. It does not like that. Can I just do this? Okay, so now if I hit this mental one, it should work. And then this should be updated. So how far did we get? Okay, so what it's doing, I bet it's setting name here. So let's try that again. Let's try this. It's setting the literal value of name instead of the this variable name. So here's personal is false. So if we click this, this should change to true, and it doesn't. So something about this is not right. So let's check this first. Let's make sure we're getting the value. Okay, so the value is true. Okay, so let's look it up. React set state with variable name. Okay, that's what I'm doing. Okay, so let's just print out the state. Okay, so we've got all those. Let's click this. I'm using value. That's what it is. Okay, so I'm setting the value. I'm setting the name based on what the field is. So I have career here, but I'm storing this thing called value that I'm using to display it. So that means that we can change this instead to be props dot attribute name. Instead of value. Actually, let's keep value because I'm not sure how to reference it here without it. So this is value. We're going to set value down here. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do is we need to take our value here. So we'll do this.state.value and invert it, negate it, so it'll switch. So I believe, okay, it changed, but it's not showing false here. So why is that? It is posting it though. So why does this text disappear? So we set value initially, and then we reference it here. It's interesting. Okay, well, let's clean up some of these console logs. So let's do new value is here. well, okay, so let's get rid of this one because that's the physical one. Okay, so here's the new value. So the new value is false. Why is that? So I sent physical, but that should have changed it. So let's print out when we negate this what that sends. So it's false. Okay, what is this value before? Let's call this data. Okay, so there's two questions. One is, why is this text disappearing? The second one is, why is this not switching? Why is this not negating the value? Because if I have false, then I do negate false. Should get true. Oh, okay. Is it because I have this as a string? I think this is starting to bite us. Okay, well, now's the time to figure this out. So let's come up here and let's see what our props are that we get. So props. Okay, this is still saying string. So maybe this is doing a weird conversion. So let's make that a Boolean for our prop type. Okay, so our value is false. When we print out the state, let's do, just trying to get some more information to figure out what's going on. Oh. Okay, and the other thing, let's get rid of all of these. So let's take these off the page. Let's make the console a little more sane. Okay, so our props we receive is false. Our current state is false. When we click this, it's false. The negated value is true. Our new value is true. We set the value back to true. So the question is, why does this not show anything? And is it because it is a Boolean and we need a string here? Let's do toString. I would have thought there would be a coercion, or yeah, I thought they would coerce that to try and print it. So that is interesting. Okay, refresh, it's true. Press, it's false. Interesting. Yeah, I'm very surprised that when this Boolean value is not just when they put this here, that it doesn't try a toString on something that's not a string. Okay, well, learn something every day. Okay, so let's clean up some of these consoles. And now let's go back here. Let's put all these back. Okay, so now we have all the attributes. Let's go ahead and get rid of this value we printed out. Whoops. Okay, so now when we click these, they automatically update. Decent amount of work for that small little thing, but I do like the behavior of it. Okay. That is a good amount of work. I think I will have it stop there. So let's go ahead and commit this stuff. So we add an API. We added a small React component. Guess we don't need this hello world component. Whoops, what did I delete? Hopefully that was not important. Okay, yeah, so we have this React component. We take in a record ID, a name, and a value. Right now all we're doing is displaying it and doing a simple API request to update the value. In the API, we just find the record based on the user, update it, a couple to-dos of things we're not handling, but now when we come to style this, we'll just have to take this button and then make it look like the mockup, and that will basically be done. Okay, so let's go ahead and commit. The other thing we don't need, one little other cleanup item, is we're not even using this form anymore. So we can just get rid of that whole thing. Cool, okay. So what do we do here? Added a /API records, React component to update the current day's attributes. Okay, well I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Next time I think I'm going to go start working on the dashboard page. So we'll make some seed data so we can pretend that we have a good history of data, and we can work on the dashboard page, and maybe get into styling after that, but we'll see. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below or hit me up on Twitter at @JohnMosesman, and I will see you next time. Thanks.